The Utah Jazz made a statement. Everybody thought they were going to Memphis to lose a game.
Hi.
Yeah, I was not one of those people. I told you that this series was over. As soon as Donovan Mitchell came back and looked great, you knew that the Jazz were not going to lose another game to the Memphis Grizzlies, and I still don't think that they will. Donovan had 30 last night. The Jazz win the game, but I guess the greater question here is, what are you left feeling about this Utah Jazz team? You watch that game. You watch the other games in the West. I have no life, so I spent a lot of time over the weekend watching basketball. I still don't believe that we know who the best team in the West is, but I think the Utah Jazz have to be there.
Yeah, I think, certainly last night Donovan Mitchell just shows he can repeatedly take over games and not have any issue doing it. And I think it's really impressive at his size and his skill set, what he's able to do. But I still think that, you have to give a lot of credit to the Grizzlies for at least battling and showing that they never quit. We're always reminded when this Jazz team plays this Grizzlies team that, the Grizzlies can come down or can come back from basically any deficit and make it a game again. So I give them a lot of credit for that. But yeah, with the Utah Jazz, are they the best team in the league, or who's the best team in the West right now? I agree. I don't know that we can say that. I've been impressed with the bounce back that the Clippers have brought. I really think that, if they can continue to play that way, they're going to be a challenge. And I also think, in this series, and we saw it again last night, the Grizzlies make a lot of mental mistakes, and the Jazz take full advantage of those. So I often wonder, what does it look like when the Jazz play a team that isn't going to make those mental errors? What does it look like when the Jazz play a team that has more skill, has more size, is more capable? I think these games are it won't, obviously it goes without saying, it won't be as easy for the Jazz to come back and win these games and dominate the series. So my biggest question for the Jazz moving forward is, again, how do we continue to work in, Bojan Bogdanovic? Because I don't feel like he's getting a ton of run, or nearly as much run as he was getting. I don't think he's even close to getting the opportunities to even score 30. I'd love to see him be 20, 25 a night, but that's not really been, the case. So at the end of the day, when the Jazz, everybody thinks they're going to play the Clippers. If they were to play the Clippers, I think this Jazz team is going to have to bring a lot more to that series than they brought to this series to beat them.
I just don't see how they play anybody else but the LA Clippers at this point. I mean, watching pretty much every minute of the Maverick game the other night, I mean, that team's cooked. Luka is, whatever this nerve injury is, he just isn't the same guy. I think very clearly Kristaps Porzingis is a huge problem for the Dallas Mavericks. But as I look around the West, I see a lot of teams that just aren't physically ready to compete. The LA Lakers, obviously, with Anthony Davis and this groin thing that he injured the other night, they say that he's going to miss tonight's game. If you're the Phoenix Suns and you lose to only LeBron, you weren't that good to begin with. And my feeling is the Suns will win this series with or without AD. I think they're just the better team right now. But if I look at the way the Clippers have come together, regardless of what Luka's doing, the Clippers have found a way to be better than the Mavericks. And I think that series is over as well. I just look at the Jazz, and my biggest question continues to be defense. It is shocking that the Jazz cannot protect the paint. It is shocking that they are just unable to dominate the boards against a team that, frankly, does not have a tenacious rebounder in the Memphis Grizzlies, but they find ways to get second-chance points. The Grizzlies find ways to force turnovers, and the thing that I struggle with is that I just don't know how the Jazz correct these defensive issues at this point, because I think it is, I guess is the word pervasive, which is throughout the roster. I don't know. Like, I look at Joe Ingles, I look at Bojan Bogdanovic, there's just simply a lack of athleticism there. They have trouble defending the Memphis Grizzlies. What's going to happen when you get to an LA Clippers series and they run waves of guys off their bench at you? I just think that I need to see the Jazz take the next step defensively. That's when I'll be willing to coronate them or crown them as the best team in the NBA.
Yeah, I think they get into a bad habit of trying to just filter everything to Rudy and relying on that, and what that ends up turning into is teams finding the middle or finding that kind of soft spot between the restricted area and the free throw line, which is where, you can make some things happen. You cannot, as a team, when you're playing team defense, just say, hey, we're going to send everything Rudy's way and hope for the best. I mean, that's just simply not going to be good enough against, again, the Clippers, as an example, who have guys who are really elite mid-range players in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So, if you think about it, let's say that they were to get, the Clippers on offense are to get Rudy Gobert involved in a pick-and-roll situation, they're either going to kick that or they're going to take the elbow jumper. Or, they're also going to be brave enough to get into Rudy's body, create the contact, and hopefully, for their sake, get an and one. And I think, in this series, we've seen when guys get into Rudy Gobert's body, it totally changes the dynamic of what Rudy's able to do. Sometimes players are aggressive and they're daring and they go after Rudy and they have success. Other times, when they don't, Rudy's able to use that length. It's the classic, it's the Gobert block on Ja when he tried to posterize him. Ja's going straight up with him, he's going to lose that. But when Ja's gotten into his body, he's won that battle. So I think for the Jazz defensively, when they play great defense, they're pushing out on the 3-point line. They're forcing teams to move the ball, and they're dictating to you what look they're going to give you. But against a team like the Clippers, who has more talent, they can overcome that. So yeah, if you don't protect the paint against a team like the Clippers, you're not surviving that.
Yeah, but I think there is also a striking lack of athleticism on this Jazz team. And that's something that really stands out to me, watching the way that the Grizzlies are attacking. You look at Dillon Brooks, and Dillon Brooks is by no means a star in this league. He is a younger player, obviously, and I mean, listen, I totally get it, but I just don't see that Dillon Brooks should be dominating the Utah Jazz. I look at the way that, Ja Morant's getting into the paint. Ja Morant's not going to be taken care of one-on-one, but you would think a team that is built on its defense or supposedly built on its defense would do a better job of keeping Ja out of the paint, and they failed at that miserably. And it's guy in and guy out. Everybody that the Grizzlies bring in are getting to the rack. And so when you're the Jazz, you're built on protecting the rim, and right now they're not protecting the rim at all against Memphis. Now, Memphis just isn't good enough to take advantage of that. Let's be honest. The Jazz are twice as good as the Memphis Grizzlies are. But it's got to worry you, at least on some level, as you watch the Clippers become just a much better team right in front of your face. I mean, the way that Kawhi Leonard's playing right now, he is back in that conversation as the best player in the playoffs right now. And the reason nobody's talking about that is because nobody's watching the Clipper-Maverick series. I really don't think anybody cares about that series at all.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when the Clippers go down early in the series, and everybody kind of writes it off. And I was definitely one of those people. I feel like this Clippers team over the last several seasons has not shown us the ability to win when it matters most. So the fact that they had gone down and were down early in this series and just going right down that path was surprising to nobody. So that's why I think nobody's watching the series. But to your point, skill often has this way of overcoming. And I think that, they talk about on the broadcast all the time where, when the more skilled team is executing at a higher level, they're going to win the game. It's just a matter of if the more skilled team is doing their job. And we've seen it firsthand in the Jazz series. The first game, even without Donovan Mitchell, you would have expected the Jazz to win the game. And they didn't execute well. They didn't play a good game. They didn't shoot well, turned it over. They were just kind of a mess in game one. But then the rest of these games, even with Dom back, they've been organized. They've been together. They've been knocking down the shot. Again, last night, somewhere in the high 40s for three-point percentage. So, they're right where they need to be. So, yeah, when you look ahead to the Clippers, the Jazz are going to need to continue to be organized and continue to make their shots. And it's really just going to be a question of, will Ty Lue continue to run out this lineup where Ivica Zubac is not starting? Because when he does that, they are a much better team. It allows them to play better defense.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. I also think there's a big conversation to be had about Rudy Gobert and his emotions or lacking control in his emotions. I think that's interesting. Good morning, Gabe Ledley says, morning, fellas, 3 away from 900. Yeah, how about that? 897. Appreciate all of you sitting on the couch watching our vids over the weekend. Thank you. Driftwood says the big dog Jazz are playing backyard hoops with the little brother Grizzlies. You know they can stomp them down at any minute, but the Jazz are good siblings, letting them stay close. They're not letting anybody do anything. I think the Jazz, I don't know if they're just not playing at their level best, but the turnovers, allowing the Grizzlies to get out and run in transition, a lot of stupid fouls. Rudy Gobert taking a technical foul because he thought he didn't get a call. These mistakes, they're fine against the Grizzlies, I guess. But again, this thing with the officials and Rudy Gobert, I don't know what it's going to take for Rudy Gobert to wake up and realize that you can't battle the officials as well as the opponent. And on a night in and night out basis, Rudy Gobert whines and complains more than any player in this league to the officials. And it is causing him problems. It is a real issue for him because he gets in the situations where you're in a full arena again. He clearly didn't hear the whistle get blown. And he freaks out and slaps the stanchion and, is going after the official, and he gets a technical foul. Right after Quinn Snyder had gotten a technical foul. Like, it's really just stupid, low IQ basketball. And if you're going to win a championship, that can't happen in the Western Conference Finals. We've seen it with Draymond Green year in and year out. It impacts the way your team plays basketball. And I think that's something you've really got to watch going forward.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think these technical fouls, really what it is it's just a breakdown mentally. You think that you deserve every call or whatever it is that he thinks, and it causes him to get really frustrated. And I think that Rudy Gobert probably thinks that he's, the best big in the league, and so that should, get him favor with the officials.
But is it frustration when it's the first call of the game? Last night, from the first whistle, he was complaining to the officials. And I don't understand that mentality, especially when you're on the road against a team that is, I don't know, are they capable of beating the Jazz? Yes. Are they likely to beat you? No. I think I said Thursday or Friday this series is over. But you're putting yourself in a position right out of the gate to be adversarial with the officials.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that.
It's not a recipe for success, that's for sure. I mean, you don't want to be on the bad side of the officials. But I just think, it's officials, study games too. Like, they study, they watch, they're trying to stay as sharp on their game as possible as well. And I just think that it's a mentality thing. Rudy, and by extension, this team likes to complain to the officials. I don't feel like every single team in the league does it. Certainly a lot of the star players do it. Book, LeBron. I mean, we've seen it throughout the playoffs. Everybody complains. But it just seems like Rudy Gobert takes it to this next level, to a point where, earlier in the season, you have his teammates telling him to, hey, stop, like, let it go, like, it's one call. Like, it does become overbearing, and I think it would do him really well to just, you can never forget about officiating, but to just say, okay, I'm not going to complain as much this game, I'm just going to focus on me. Because if he did that, I think he'd actually get more calls than he gets now.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't be getting essentially shut out in the first half. I mean, he dominated the third quarter, and he got buckets when they needed buckets and didn't have an alternative. But, I mean, Rudy Gobert was, for all intent and purposes, Rudy just was not a factor in the first half. And this goes back to that defense that we talk about. He changes shots. Yes, he blocks shots. Rudy Gobert defensively is not the reason the Jazz are winning games. Mm-hmm. And I think there becomes a value proposition that takes place. This is Ben Simmons in Philly last night. It was pretty incredible watching the Washington Wizards play, hack-a-ben, because the guy can't make free throws. And watching the way that game played out and seeing the momentum shift that happened after Joel Embiid lost that game, or left that game rather, you felt like somebody had died, and then Philly got back into it. And so what did the Wizards do? They just fouled a guy that they know can't shoot. And at some point, I think teams are going to allow Rudy Gobert to just do what he does because he's not stopping you. He is blocking those shots is great. The Grizzlies are routinely dunking, getting to the basket, getting layups, getting interior. Like, again, just looking at the numbers last night, the way that, the box score looks for Rudy Gobert, oh, man, 8 boards, 17 points, 2 blocks, 3 fouls. Like, he dominated. Well, the problem is he didn't dominate. You look at the points in the paint, and Memphis dominated 64-40.
Yeah.
Like, this is not, and again, I know that you're going to think I'm picking on Rudy or I'm just being a dick or whatever. He's making $200 million, and you're losing the paint by 24 points against a team without a force in the middle. Valanciunas has been a 0 since this series went back to Memphis. A 0. And I look at a guy like, Rudy, I just feel like this should be a no-brainer. Rudy 8 rebounds? All he had is 8 rebounds and 2 blocks. For a guy that is a dominant paint presence, how are you not 15 and 15 game in and game out?
Well, it's what you always say, right? I mean, Rudy thrives when the Jazz don't shoot well.
Yes.
Think about that. Like the Jazz last night shoot the ball at a really high rate, and obviously they then go on
50% from 3.
They then go on to win the game, and so you think about it, and it's almost insane to think that a guy with, what is his? I think they talk about it all the time. He's got like a 10-foot wingspan or whatever it is. A guy with that kind of insane wingspan, you would think would be 15 boards a night, without any kind of issue. Last night, I look at that offensive board by Donovan Mitchell. It's that mentality where he's literally, he doesn't have to go up and off the weak side block, goes way up to get a board. He didn't have to go and get that board, but it's a mentality thing. And I wish that Rudy Gobert would say, look, I am the backbone of this defense, and I'm going to intimidate people. I am going to be that force that keeps people out of the paint. I remember when, we all remember that highlight where they're playing the Spurs. I can't remember if that was last season or early this year, where the Spurs are out in transition and Rudy just happens to be back, and the Spurs back away and go back to the three-point line. Everybody said that was Rudy Gobert being this amazing player. And we sat here on the show and told you, hey, no, that was them trying to find a higher percentage look, because it's probably not smart to go up one-on-one against Rudy. So no. The point is, you don't need, you don't need to go one-on-one with Rudy Gobert. There's no need for it. They can't stop you in other sets. They can't stop you from dribble penetrating and hitting a mid-range jumper. They can't stop you from sending 2 guys to the rim because Rudy's the only one rebounding. Right? Like that, to me, that's the point. So anyway, to wrap all this up, to say you beat Memphis by 7, but there is clear room for improvement by this Utah Jazz team defensively. And I can see everybody freaking out over what I said about Rudy Gobert. No, I don't think he sucks or that they should cut him. Thank you. Mulvanian, good morning to you. He says, Monty was right. Series is over. This isn't last year's Denver with Murray and Joker. 3-1 won't become 3-4. No, it won't. This series is over. Agreed.
It's over tomorrow night. Ilert Gnick, good morning to you. He says, if the Jazz are hitting their shots, they're the best. If they're not getting in, they suck. Well, there's something to that. Good morning. Mitchell Harding says, hey, lads, hope you're doing well. Same to you. Axel Granzini says, I think Rudy of last season would have made those clutch free throws. Yeah, I think Rudy's doing fine from the free throw line. I think he is. It's part of Rudy has definitely gotten better from the free throw line. I hope that this coming off season that translates into a 10-foot jump shot. That's what I hope. I mean, the pick and pop jumper in this league is vital, and you're going to get a good look at it with the LA Clippers, because that's an elite mid-range team. That's what terrifies me about the Clippers versus the Jazz. The LA Clippers are an elite mid-range team.
Well, and then they can shoot the 3 as well. That's the big thing with the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies don't shoot the 3 at a real high level, which is why they have to live in the paint. And that's why they're going to always struggle to beat a team like the Jazz who shoots the 3 at a high rate. So, I mean, that's just as straightforward as it is.
Yep. Emmanuel Quaya Good morning, Emmanuel. Says, do you guys think the Jazz can win a championship this year? Oh, absolutely. I think the Jazz are capable of beating any team. They've got to clean up some of the turnovers. I think some of this is they don't take the Grizzlies seriously because they know that they can put their foot on the gas and go from a tie game to a 12-point lead in the matter of a minute and a half because they're lethal from three. Royce O'Neal, who's a guy I've been critical of, hits 3 really big threes last night that stopped runs this Jazz team is elite. There's no question about that. And don't mistake anything that I'm saying about Rudy Gobert as a shun of the Utah Jazz. This Jazz team's elite. There is no question about that. There are a few teams in the West I think are better than them. In fact, I don't know that there is one. A 7-game series against this LA Clipper team terrifies me. It is one of those things where you're already seeing that the Memphis Grizzlies are more athletic than the Utah Jazz. I can guarantee you the LA Clippers are far more athletic than the Utah Jazz. And the guy that we talked about a lot the day they signed him was Rajon Rondo. And playoff Rondo is in full effect. That behind-the-back deke the other night for the layup, like you're seeing him make the right pass at the right time. And what do you know? He's getting into guys. He is putting his verbal voice out there, and the Clippers are responding. And you're seeing that one of the switches that they've hit is they're not relying on Paul George to win games. And I think that has been something over Paul's career that he's demanded. Well, the last month, I think you're seeing that responsibility being taken away from him. This Kawhi Leonard's team, these games that they've won against the Mavericks, they've won because Kawhi Leonard's been elite. And again, nobody's watching, nobody's paying attention. Kawhi Leonard's been elite. Whether you have, Luka and his mom being hot and healthy or not, because he clearly is not, it doesn't matter. Before he was hurt, Kawhi Leonard was elite. And he is only going to get better. And I think somebody woke the Clippers up. I don't know how, I don't know when, somebody woke the Clippers up. And if that is in fact the case, look out, because I don't think that's a matchup you want. I really don't.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be really interesting if, it's probably more, it's not if, it's when the Clippers advance at this point.
Yes.
I think everybody agrees on that. So when the Clippers advance, and then I think, we haven't dipped into the Lakers yet, but let's say that the Lakers were to lose the series to the Suns, which looks more and more likely. I think it'd be a really interesting dynamic for the Jazz moving forward. I mean, think about it. Last year we talked all about, and it just got brought up about the Nuggets and that whole situation in the bubble. Well, think of it this way. I mean, if you get past the Clippers and you're this Jazz team, I think you'd be more concerned about the Clippers than you would be the Suns, let's say, if the Suns were to get to the Western Conference Finals. So I just think if you're the Jazz, it's this whole dynamic where if you handle your business, you execute at a high level, you're playing good defense, you're knocking down your shots, it's going to be hard to beat you.
And by the way, you're doing all of this without much impact from Bojan Bogdanović, without much impact from Joe Ingles. And I think eventually as you get more comfortable having Don back in the lineup, Bogdanović has got to find his legs. I think Joe Ingles has got to find his legs in a series against the Clippers. Because those two guys, I think Joe just doesn't have a great matchup in this Memphis series.
Yeah.
I mean, athletically, I think it's a tough get for Joe Ingles. But he's such a critical player for this team off the bench. I think in a Clippers series, he plays a critical role because he does have matchups in that series. So it'll just be interesting to see. The Jazz absolutely need to close this out tomorrow night at the Vivint. You've got to get that done. And then I think you need, because that's going to give you, depending on what the Clippers do, that could give you up to a week of rest.
Yeah.
Which would be great to get practice, to get, to really get your groove back.
John's ankle.
To really get your groove back. I think he looks fine physically. I never once thought about his ankle. I don't know what it feels like or if it's an issue for him. It certainly doesn't look like it. It really doesn't. Zachary Kaufman, good morning to you. He says they have two bigs that would love to have. Come on now. They have won 3 games in a row. How can you complain about Gobert? Okay, well, I think Derek Favors has been the far more impactful of the two offensively, but that's what you would expect. They're yin and yang. I want more out of Rudy Gobert defensively. I want a I want a guy that is going to shut off the paint, period. And I think against the Clippers, you're going to need that. You're going to get a steady dose from here forward, no matter who it winds up being. And right now, if I have my feet to the fire, I think you're probably going to wind up playing the Suns. The Suns are again, an elite mid-range team. Between Chris Paul, who looked miraculously better the other day, between Chris Paul and Devin Booker, those are arguably two of the best mid-range players in the NBA right now.
Yeah.
And this Jazz team is not athletic enough to compete with them at the perimeter. And the Suns believe they're better than the Jazz. I guarantee that. After what we saw in the regular season, Don or not, I think the Suns believe they're better than the Utah Jazz. If you wind up playing the Suns in what would be the Western Conference Finals, I think that'd be a hell of a series.
Well, what do you think of Ayton versus Gobert? Because I think Ayton's come a long way in his own right. You know, I mean, we've seen a lot of growth there.
My biggest thing with DeAndre Ayton continues to be he cannot catch the ball.
Yeah.
And it is an Achilles heel for their pick and roll game, because you can see that Devin Booker and Chris Paul hesitate to throw the ball to DeAndre Ayton in certain situations. And Rudy Gobert having a 86-foot wingspan makes it very difficult to throw a high lob to DeAndre Ayton off of the pick and roll. And you may get away with that with the Lakers, because I think the Lakers are wounded right now. You're not going to get away with that against a guy like Rudy Gobert. He is too adept of a shot blocker to allow DeAndre Ayton to just pick and roll him to death. Where DeAndre Ayton wins that matchup is he can hit the jump shot. His elbow jumper is very good. He is an exceptionally good offensive rebounder. And what you see out of the Jazz, and we saw this with Jaren Jackson a couple times last night, was when Rudy doubles, teams are only, attacking Rudy so he will double, so they can kick for a layup or a dunk. And you know how good Chris Paul and Devin Booker are at distributing. And if you look at what you're getting from a guy like, I mean, that roster up and down in Phoenix, I mean, you can point to anybody that you want.
Yeah.
They are getting contributions top to bottom. Cam Johnson's got to knock his three down. I think Mikal Bridges has to play great defense. And that's a 7-game series if I've seen one. But I'll tell you, you better not be looking past the Clippers, because I think there's a lot of people who are saying that. Zachary Kaufman says, unsubscribe, horrible takes. Okay. I mean, well, you're welcome to be here, welcome to not. I mean, cool. Appreciate you being here. I don't know what you said. I'm guessing you cursed because YouTube hid your comment. Zachary Kaufman, unsubscribe if you like. Eric C. says, Chelsea, Monty. Yes.
Hey.
Champions League. Jake is not a soccer fan at all.
But I was there, was I not? I was there with you watching the game.
Only because you had nothing else to do, I would guess. But Chelsea won the Champions League. It was fantastic. It was amazing. Appreciate you bringing that up. Guy says, need some box-out drills at practice. Well,
yeah.
You know what? I think there is a lacking of intensity at times with this Jazz team. It's Memphis, which is, I guess, understandable. I think it's dangerous. I mean, Memphis is a team that's not capable, I don't think, of beating you. I mean, the Jazz are not playing great basketball. Let's be honest. Having watched, 70-plus games of this Jazz team this season, I think we all realize the Jazz are not playing their best basketball right now. The turnovers, the stupid fouls, which continue to haunt this team, that's going to get cleaned up. Those things are, Quinn's too good of a coach. His staff is too good of a staff. They're going to get that cleaned up. I would think against the Clippers, who I think are their eventual next round, that all goes away. And I think you start playing more rotational basketball. The things that scare you against the Clippers is how often is Jordan Clarkson going to pass? Well, not much. Him and Donovan Mitchell, getting into it at the top of the key a little bit last night, where Don's yelling at Clarkson to give him the ball. And what did Clarkson do? Didn't give him the ball. He shot. Now it went in, by the way. But, I mean, those are situations that you would hope would get cleaned up. I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think your intensity level would go up against the Clippers a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous game to play as a team, though, to play down to opponents or play up to opponents. And I don't like the fact that last night and really in this series, I mean, you're playing games that are we're in the fourth quarter last night, and it's a 3-point game at one point. Like, what are we doing? Like, why would you not just put this team away. Put them away, break their spirit, don't give them any hope. Like, I don't understand why, for the life of me, why this team, fiddles around in under 10-point games with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter against teams that they're clearly better than, and when you're not going to have, let's put it this way, you're not going to have the luxury of saying, oh, well, it's Memphis, we're just going to we're going to take 5 minutes off here and then we'll turn it back on.
We know we can go on the road and win.
And that's not the case with the Clippers, man. I'm telling you.
I agree.
I'm not saying the Clippers are going to just roll out and beat the Jazz in 6 or something, but I do think that this Clippers team will, at times in this series, dominate the Jazz, and then the Jazz are going to have to bounce back, and it's gonna be a tough series, if that happens, assuming it happens. So I think it's obviously a much closer matchup, and then if you were to get by the Clippers, then I think your run to the finals is pretty straightforward at that point.
Yeah, and I think the things that you feel good about are that the Clippers haven't gotten much off their bench. I mean, honestly, if you look at, Rondo's the guy that's really contributing, but he's more of, rebounds and dimes. He's not a guy that you're going to worry about shooting threes. But athletically, the question is, does Zubats have a place in a series against the Jazz? Well, yeah, he does. And I think that place is when Derek Favors is in the game.
I think the real question is, what's Rudy Gobert's role in this series when the Clippers show up? Because I think the Clippers are going to go small. I think the Clippers are going to outrun Rudy Gobert, and I think they're going to do everything that they can do to get as many easy buckets as possible. I think that will be definitely a point of strategy for the Clippers, because it's like you've said it. I mean, literally, not exaggerating, must be 50 times on the show at this point, that the last time the Jazz and the Clippers matched up, you have that situation that the Clippers created, where you get Pat Bev in the corner against Rudy, and it just creates chaos for the Jazz defense.
You got to stop switching everything. I mean, and again, in that series, the guy you like to talk about is Marcus Morris.
Yeah.
I think Marcus Morris being stupid and getting a technical foul after making a three the other night is really dumb. And I think you can beat the dumb Clippers if the Clippers act stupidly.
Yeah.
I think to do that, you're going to have to make a bunch of threes. Clippers aren't giving up 50% to the Jazz at the 3-point line.
No.
That team is too good to do that. But we'll see. We're way ahead of things. The Jazz got to close out. The Clippers got to close out. And I think both of them will. I think they're two of the best teams in the NBA. I look at you guys, a ton of comments, so I apologize.
The comment drops.
I'm trying to keep up with the Mulvanian says, Jazz rely too much on Rudy's D, system vulnerable to Dillon Brooks types, physical two-guard wing size players. Yeah, I think you look at, and there's a lot of those guys in the league. I mean, I think obviously Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, that spot-up jumper in the paint that Ja Morant's hitting consistently, that's the problem for the Jazz. They cannot defend that. And when Rudy steps up to get to the shooter, they're just dropping that down. And in this case, it was Jaren Jackson with the dunk, or, Rondo penetrating. Again, and this goes to our point on Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Mike Conley largely kept Ja Morant out of the paint for stretches in the third quarter. And that's how the Jazz were able to really wrangle control of this game. But I don't know. I think the Clippers are a much deeper, more complete team than, obviously, Memphis is so young.
Yeah.
Memphis is so young. Zachary Kaufman says they're funneling players to Gobert. Right. And Zachary, I know you're a huge Gobert guy. What is he doing with that? They're funneling guys to Rudy Gobert. They're losing the points in the paint by 24. And against a team that's not a real good mid-range team. Memphis is not a good mid-range team. They have a bunch of young bucks who like to shoot threes. Jaren Jackson is so head over heels in love with his three ball that he's giving away opportunities inside. But Dillon Brooks is getting inside and scoring. Slow-mo Kyle Anderson is getting inside and scoring. Ja Morant has dominated the paint in this series. So you're saying that they're funneling guys to Rudy Gobert, and I'm telling you that's not a good thing. They're not. The Utah Jazz have one fatal flaw. It's a lack of athleticism on the perimeter. That's their fatal flaw. They're tremendous three-point shooters. They shot 50% in a playoff game. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
That's not luck or an accident. That's skill. The issue is You're not going to be able to do that against upper-end teams. The best teams you're likely to see, and who knows what Embiid's situation is, but you're likely to see Philly, Milwaukee, or Brooklyn in the NBA Finals if you're to get that far. All three of those teams are really crazy good defensively. Like, turn it up as much or as little as they want defensively. So you look at who you're going to run into, you're likely to see the Clippers followed by the Phoenix Suns, in my opinion. Both of those teams are crazy good defensively. Do you realize how good the Phoenix Suns are defensively?
I don't think people do, legit. I don't.
And again, I have no life, so I watch tons of NBA basketball, and I happen to slurp Devin Booker on a nightly basis. Thank you for all the tweets yesterday on that. But they're really good defensively. And the thing that they do that makes life difficult for the Jazz is they aggressively push out to the three-point line because you're not quick enough to go by them. Even if they overplay you to the three-point line, you're not quick enough to go by them all the way to the rim. And that's why you're seeing guys like Donovan Mitchell. They're going to let Donovan do what he does because you're not going to stop him. But again, where's Joe Ingles in that series? Where's Bojan Bogdanovic in that series? Jordan Clarkson has to be a 25, 30-point-a-night guy for them to beat the Suns. I don't know that he's capable of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll find out, right? Jeremy Bolton says, thank you, Jake. Why is the rhetoric always the Jazz should be scared of the Lakers? Jazz should be scared of the Suns. Jazz should be, etc. Why isn't it the other way around?
Well, I think it's not the other way around because if you watch, and this is no criticism of anybody in the comments, I'm just saying simply if you watch a lot of basketball, that's why Zach Kaufman, that's his first name, Kaufman, his take about well, you guys are idiots about Gobert. Teams are the Jazz are funneling, the offending player to Rudy Gobert. Well, yeah, the Jazz are always going to do that on defense, but the issue is that, the Jazz can be had because to Monty's point about the lack of athleticism, but then if you take that lack of athleticism and you use it, you're going to get by them, you're going to get into the paint, and then you're going to get fouled, or you're going to kick it and you're going to knock the three down. And that's what I think Jazz fans don't want to talk about. Against the Grizzlies, the Jazz can afford to turn it over. I'd have to look at the box, but they can afford to turn it over 10, 12 times against the Grizzlies and not have a care in the world. I'm telling you, you turn the ball over double digits, whether that's 10 or 50 against the Clippers, you're losing that game. You are losing that game because if you turn it over, they're definitely going to get fouled. And then at that point, they're definitely going to shoot a high percentage at the free throw line, and then they're getting out ahead of you. And that's what nobody wants to talk about.
Well, and the scarier stat about this game last night, and again, the Jazz won it, right?
Yeah, they won.
120 to 113.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies and the Jazz were dead even on rebounds at 42 apiece. Like, that should be like, whoa, how is that possible?
Eight boards last night for a $200 million player. That's not good enough.
Yeah, it is. These are all just things you need to pay attention to. And whether they are an intensity issue, let's hope that's the case.
And by the way, maybe we're morons and we don't know basketball, but when they play the Clippers, because that's likely going to happen here, they're going to win this series. Clippers look like they're fine. When they play the Clippers, and we're having this conversation in what would be a week's time, I guess, from today or whenever that series would potentially start, you remember today's show because I'm telling you the turnovers will come back to haunt this team, and then the lack of mental toughness when it comes to officiating will come back to hurt this team. And Rudy Gobert is at the center of a lot of those issues. Yes, does he bring a lot of value? Yes, he does. He brings a lot of value. He does a lot of great things for your basketball team. But this team, it's not good enough for this team to just go to the Western Conference Finals anymore. We're talking about winning championships now.
It's championship or bust for the Utah Jazz.
And that requires a higher level of accountability. And Jazz fans don't want to have that conversation, I feel like.
Well, and I also think that, yeah, you got to stay healthy. It really is that simple.
Well, yeah.
Mitchell Harding says, I'm currently sweating on Conley's hamstring. He's the difference. Well, how many when Jones landed on Conley last night? How many of us were like, oh.
By the way.
Like, you're worried about that.
I understand why they got to call the landing zone fouls. Totally get it. Don't disagree with player safety or anything. However, my only complaint is that I do feel like now players are starting to take advantage of that. The offensive player is intentionally pushing their feet forward to try to get that call. And if you're doing that and you were to suffer some kind of injury or whatever, I don't know that we can be feeling sorry for guys if they're going to play that way.
Yeah, I hate that call. Officiating is what it is. Like I you know what? It's in the rule book. They're going to call it. Like
Yeah.
I wish anyway. Philippe Berlinick says the Suns is the 6th or 7th defense. Okay, well, tell that to the Lakers right now. Tell that if you look at the Phoenix Suns, I think the Suns are one of the better teams left in the playoffs defensively. I mean, I watch an inordinate amount of NBA basketball, but the Phoenix Suns have the ability to just keep tightening the screw, man. Like they identify what you're good at, 3-point shooting, and Monty Williams draws up a schematic to take that from you.
And they want to bring the toughness too, by the way. They will not be intimidated by anybody.
Yeah, I mean it's very interesting to watch, frankly. Austin Parkin, good morning to you. Jordan Clarkson was killing me in Game 3 and in the first half of Game 4, just running up, chucking 3-point bricks with 18 seconds left on the shot clock. No Jazz man anywhere near the basket. Yeah, it's frustrating. It is absolutely frustrating to watch that. Thankfully, he went into the paint in the second half of Game 4. That's the difference maker in this league right now. So many teams are in love with that 3-ball. It's the teams who are willing to score in the paint. And I don't mean, throw it to Anthony Davis for a turnaround fall away. I mean, get in the paint, teardrop, get in the paint, quick jumper, like that ability to finish inside of 10 feet with a little runner or jumper is game-changing.
Yeah.
The best teams in the league can do it. We're watching, if you look at who's left, like Luka Doncic is a magician when he's healthy at it. He is fantastic. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell. Although, man, the other thing that comes to mind on that is Donovan Mitchell takes a beating every single time he goes in the paint.
Yeah.
Every single time. The guy takes a beating, and it's tough to watch. Mulvanian says Clarkson, very efficient short-range shooter, sometimes shooting against 3 defenders inside. He's there to score, period. Like, he's not going to be a facilitator on any level.
But don't you think that, in the regular season, that's good enough? But I think we both agree that in the postseason, Jordan Clarkson as a player himself has to know that taking those short jumpers over 3 guys, you might as well call that a turnover. I mean, you're not making that shot, and
high degree of difficulty.
Yeah, and so I'm fine with him in his role coming off the bench for ideally 20 to 25 a night. That would be, if you could get 25 a night against again what's probably going to be the Clippers. That's going to be huge for this team. But again, it's those nights, and we saw it a little bit last night. Give him credit. He got away from it, but he turned the ball over like 2-3 possessions in a row and then bounced back from it. So I just hope that for the Jazz's sake, going into the next round that he fixes those things.
Yeah, the interesting conversation happening in the comments right now is about the Clippers being, just a given to win that series. Show me something else. Show me why I should believe, Berlinick says everybody's saying the Clippers for this one have this one in the bag. After winning 2, they forgot the Mavs have Luka. Well, the problem is Luka Doncic is hurt, and he is just not effective. And by the way, the Clippers got physical with him, and what happened? He's not shooting such a high percentage. You include this neck shoulder nerve damage thing, and the fact that his shot is off, that who else is going to pick up the slack for them? Tim Hardaway was awful the other night.
Yeah.
I look at Kristaps Porzingis, and I don't know where that bro went, because he's frustrating. You want to talk about a frustrating big? Kristaps Porzingis is a frustrating big. The Mavericks, I think, got insanely hot, and all of a sudden that series is even. And all of a sudden, you don't have home court advantage anymore. That went back to L.A. Like, all of a sudden, the Clippers feel really good about themselves, and the Mavs are hurt. And I don't see any way that the Clippers are going to lose this momentum. They're playing too well.
Yeah, well, and it's what we always talk about. Again, the Clippers are the more skilled team. They have more guys that can do more things than the Mavericks do. And it really is just a matter of time in these situations for the skilled team to start executing at a higher level. And yeah, the Mavericks were making a ton of shots. Now, I had some major concerns, frankly, about this Clippers team on the mental side. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that they bounced back so strongly just from the mental side. I didn't feel like they had a lot of leadership, but it seems like that's been fixed, and all of a sudden they're playing great basketball and everything's kosher. So and you combine that with Luka's injury, Porzingis, like all the issues, and yeah, this series is over, man. I mean, I don't see how there's any other way to look at it.
I just think that things have changed dramatically. That's why I would say that. We match up better with the Mavericks. There is no doubt about that. Illerkinick says, "What if the Mavs win though?" That's a gift. If the Mavericks win this series against the Clippers,
you want that.
Yeah, you want that.
Yeah.
You don't want anything to do with either LA team. I'm telling you. And it is, obviously the Lakers without AD are a lot less dangerous, but you don't want anything to do with either one of those LA teams. I would say that. AK says, "Hi, mates." Hello.
Hello.
Jordan McDonald says, "Lakers will win that series. CP3 will get hurt again." I hope not. I mean, Chris Paul, I think he's worked so hard to get back here. You hope that guys are healthy. And by the way, you want to beat the best teams when they're at their best. That's how you determine who the best team is. The Nye guy says Bogey was at a junior jazz camp and got the ball stolen 3 times by 8-year-olds. My butt cheeks clench every time he dribbles the ball. Okay, Nye guy. All right, that's probably true. I mean, anyway. Jordan Crabtree says Western Conference is amazing. Every series except the Jazz is 2-2. This Nuggets series with Portland tonight might be the night. Like this is Denver should win this series even without Jamal Murray. Denver should win this. I'm a little surprised at the lack of continuity offensively, and I think this is a Michael Malone issue. His rotations are not great, and they lose rhythm because of the way he rotates guys in and out of that lineup. And I think that's really hurting them in this series.
Yeah, I think that game, they just straight up didn't make shots. And whether that's because of his rotations or they just had a bad night, they got their ass kicked straight up. I mean, Portland took it to them, and late in that game, Portland had no mercy. Portland was trying to prove a point. Portland was trying to say, hey, we're the better team here. This is our series. And yeah, I would agree that this next game is I would say it's bigger than just a defining game in the series. I think for Jokic, this sets up to be one of those games where he's going to go for 40, maybe even 50. He goes off.
Oh, he better.
And he just gets after it,
You can't be minus 32 if you're Nikola Jokic. He was minus 32 the other night. They lose 115-95. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely embarrassing. It's shocking.
And they're saying Will Barton's going to play in this game. They're saying that he's going to they were talking
when I see it.
Yeah, well, same. I mean, they were talking pregame before, Denver gets slacked that Will Barton's really close, and they're just kind of waiting to see, and they're really hoping that he comes back for this next game. And so if he comes back for this next game, maybe that changes some things. But at the end of the day, this series is going to come down to Denver making shots. Because if Denver's making shots, they're a better team than Portland. But when I want to say it was some ridiculous stat that they were shooting 15% or something from 3 in that game that they just lost. They just weren't hitting anything. And I don't know how you explain that. And I think your point about Malone's crappy rotations is well taken, because when you run a bad rotation, when you make substitutions when you shouldn't, you do this or that when you shouldn't, it throws off the rhythm of the offense. And so you're not knocking down your J.
They just did not. Anyway, the Nuggets are an incredibly. I'm so glad I'm not a Nuggets fan. That team would make me pull my hair out. I just can't. Let's get a couple more before we talk about LaMelo Ball banging an older chick. Jeez, excuse me. Who is more injured by Suns versus Jazz? Well, me right now. I'm dying over here.
Yeah.
Who's more injured Suns or Jazz, Conley or Paul determines who wins that series. Well, I don't think Mike Conley's injured right now.
Yeah, I don't think he's
he's
injured.
playing
I don't
at
know.
an incredibly high level.
That shot looked just fine last night. Coming off the pick and roll, knocked it down a bunch of times. I think what you're really asking us is, hey, what's the bigger impact, if the Jazz were to lose Mike Conley or if the Suns were to lose Chris Paul? And I'm telling you right now, if the Suns lose Chris Paul, that is a huge loss for them. The Jazz can absorb losing Mike Conley, absolutely, because that would just mean that Bogdanovich is going to get his looks back, and they'll be able to backfill.
I don't know about that. I think Mike Conley is make or break for the Jazz. He is such a good shooter. He is such a smart basketball player. Obviously, he's playing with a mission in mind to show Memphis who he is still. Okay, cool. He has to be healthy. It is not, to me, Bojan Bogdanović is not a guy I want to have to rely on. And I think he's a nice fourth option. He's not a guy I want to rely on.
Yeah.
And it's scary to the thought of not having Mike Conley on this team is like not having AD, not having LeBron, not having Dame, not having Chris Paul.
You really think losing him is that?
Yes. His three-pointer right now is knocked down, and he's playing really good defense. He's one of the few guys who can keep a guy in front of him.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is important for them. And he has that ability to just say, give me the ball. And I'm going to put you in the right spot. I'm going to make the pass. And this is probably two X and O's, but when Mike Conley passes you the ball, it's in the shooting pocket. Like it's ready to go. You don't have to reach behind you. It's not high or low or over your head, it's right on your hands, right in your shooting motion. You're ready to go. His three ball's pure. His defense is good. Mike Conley is so critical to this Jazz team. He is, you can live without, like Royce O'Neal. And I know that Royce has shot the three better.
Yeah.
I think he had 3 of them last night. You can live without Royce O'Neal. You could probably live without Joe Ingles. I don't know what you do if any of those other guys are hurt. Of your main rotational players,
Yep.
Got to have Jordan Clarkson, got to have Mike Conley, got to have Don, Rudy. I think Derek Favors has become an incredibly important player to this team because you don't have another big.
You're right. Yeah.
They don't have a lot of room for error because there's not a lot of depth on this team.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it's very simple what success looks like for the Utah Jazz, but it's also very simple what happens when one guy goes down. And that again, not to go down the rabbit hole of the trade deadline, but that's why we were so concerned about that. So hopefully they stay healthy. Hopefully everyone stays healthy and everything's kosher.
Brandon Whiteside says we are the medical staff firing away from sweeping the Grizz this series. Yeah. If Donovan Mitchell plays in game 1, this series is over already.
Yeah.
But it's not, but maybe this shows you the importance of Donovan Mitchell. Sure, I get with that. Jeremy Bolton says, also, why aren't we talking about Dylan Brooks being a little biatch this entire series? Conley has been very surgical the last 3 games. Dude is really fun to watch right now. Well, I think Dylan Brooks is very young. I think Dylan Brooks is very emotional. And I think it's a big part of his game. I think it's an important part of his game. I think it's the best part of his game, and I think it's the worst part of his game.
Yeah.
I think that third foul he picked up on Donovan Mitchell in the paint was pure frustration, a lack of emotion. But then what happens? They leave him in the game, and he doesn't get his 4th foul. And then when he did get his 4th foul, what'd they do? They left him in the game, and he never got his 5th foul. Like, he's capable of controlling himself.
Yeah.
And when you get those driving layups, when you get those fast break dunks, like his defense, the thing that nobody's talking about is his defense is very good. Now, you have a guy in Rudy Gobert who's very difficult to deal with in the pick and roll, which is why Don and Conley are getting so many quality looks at the top. But Dylan Brooks is playing great defense. And more than that, he's a wanting rebounder, which I actually think there's a lot of value in. He's a very good player. And we're just seeing the beginning. He is Draymond Green, but better.
Yeah.
That's his ceiling. So, we'll see how that goes. I don't know. The Jazz are in Brooks' head. He checked out. he checked under his bed to make sure Don wasn't there last night. They have been talking this entire series.
It's who he is.
I mean,
he
thrives on that.
Dude, you guys are sitting here saying that the Jazz are like, in Dylan Brooks' head and, all this stuff. And it's like, dude, that's the kind of game that Dylan Brooks plays. I would remind you that Dylan Brooks has dropped multiple, 28, 30-point games on you in this series. I mean, I don't know that I can agree that the Jazz are in his head. Are they talking trash? Yeah. Are they going back and forth? Absolutely. And that's what's made that matchup probably the best game within the game. I mean, Dylan Brooks we saw last night when they switched him off of Don and Grayson Allen had to pick up Donovan Mitchell. I mean, that was a defining moment in that game. That was essentially the beginning of the end for the Memphis Grizzlies in that game.
Tyler on Twitter is pretty upset that I said that we could live without, quote unquote, we can live without Joe Ingles.
Mm-hmm.
You're crazy. Do you even watch Jazz basketball?
Well, no, apparently
LOL.
not. I mean, there we go.
Okay, so tell me right now, what does Joe Ingles do that is irreplaceable right now on this team? He does one thing really well, and that is shoot the three. And you have a ton of dudes that can shoot the three. Joe Ingles played 24 minutes last night. 1 of 4, 0 of 2 from 3, 5 boards, 4 dimes, 2 points. Now, on its face, that isn't a whole lot. The problem is you're used to a whole lot from Joe Ingles. And in a Clippers series, he's going to have a much larger role, would be my guess. This series, he doesn't have a role because they're young and athletic on the wings. If one guy had to go down, I think you could win a championship if Joe Ingles got hurt.
Yeah.
God forbid, heavens to Betsy, Joseph take the wheel. If Joe Ingles, snaps a ligament somewhere or can't play for whatever reason, the Jazz will win a championship. If they are good enough to win a championship. Joe Ingles won't determine that one way or the other. Donovan, Conley, Rudy Gobert, Derek Favors, those guys are much more difficult to replace.
I don't think people quite understand the Derek Favors dynamic. Like, I think people are like, are you saying that Favors is somehow, on par with Rudy or something? I think that people don't understand his impact and why he's so important.
If you don't have Derek Favors, who are you replacing him with? Ersan Ilyasova? You want that? Azubuike? You want that? You don't have a guy behind Rudy Gobert. You just don't. Without Derek Favors there's no there.
Mm-hmm.
So when I judge the value of guys, it's not necessarily what they put in the box score. Now, it just so happens that D. Faves is playing 16 minutes and giving you 8 points and 5 boards. Those are a critical 16 minutes because he continues to produce offense. Whether it's that little push jump shot, whether it's big rebounds, picking up fouls so that Rudy does not have to. Those minutes are irreplaceable minutes. So, again, explain to me, if it's not Derek Favors, who is it? Because there's nobody there.
There's not another guy.
We keep hearing about all this depth. George Niang is a guy that you can do without. Now, his three-point shooting is really important. I think it was 2 for 2 last night or something like that.
And his threes,
2 for 2.
And his threes are impactful. When he's making his shots, they are. Hey, we've moved the ball around. We're getting good looks. And Niang's a guy that's
open. What Niang's threes are? They're heartbreaking because I think I remember both of them. The Grizzlies had played really good defense. The Jazz rotated the ball to a wide open George Niang, who knocks that three down. He punishes you for disrespecting him. Jaren Jackson can't do that. The problem is there's a whole bunch of dudes on the Clippers who can do that. Rondo can do that. Marcus Morris is doing that. He's having an unbelievable shooting year. You're not getting that from Jaren Jackson right now. You're not getting that from pretty much anybody. By the way, Is anybody going to tell me how beautiful, intelligent, smart,
whatever
I am for telling you that the Jazz will miss Grayson Allen?
Yeah.
Grayson Allen's done pretty well for himself in this series.
Including last night on defense.
Grayson Allen's a guy that you would love to have on this team. Now, the problem is that, the trade was a good one. But Grayson Allen's a guy that is a pretty good example of somebody that's having his way with the Jazz in this series. So, anyway, my point is, if we're going to do without a guy, I would be fine to do without a Joe Ingles. You need Derek Favors more than you need Joe Ingles.
Well, let's just make sure that we don't lose Trent Forrest, because we all know that losing Trent Forrest would be, world-ending.
He's going into the Ring of Honor,
yeah.
Right? I mean, they're going to give him a car dealership,
of
right?
course.
I mean,
yeah,
come on,
yeah.
Jeremy Bolton said, "I don't mind the talk back and forth. That's great, but the headbutt on Conley and then the full-on punches when the refs are stop."
Why is everybody freaking out over this? I mean, honestly, like
there are no full-on punches when the refs.
I mean, come on, guy. I mean, it's not like he threw a haymaker at him or something. I mean, come on, man. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, it should be said.
Stop.
The only reason this is even a conversation is because it's the Memphis Grizzlies and Dillon Brooks, who nationally, from a national perspective, is a nobody. If we put a camera on Anthony Davis the whole game, I guarantee you we can find situations where he does some things that aren't the most popular.
Everybody
does it, dude. It's part of the league.
Rudy Gobert does that on a regular basis.
I mean, do you know how many elbows? Dude, do you know how many elbows Rudy Gobert throws in a game?
If you are not playing physically, it's an important part of every Big's game.
And by the way, if the official's not going to blow the whistle, did it ever happen?
No,
it didn't.
It's only speeding if you get caught,
dude.
man.
It's part of the game.
Come on. Royce O'Neal has kept us in games with his shooting.
Stop.
Eric C. says Grayson over Conley. No, not. That's why I said no.
No, who said Grayson over Conley?
Well, that was the trade. That he was involved in that deal. No. But what I said was, man, you'd love to have Grayson Allen on your bench right now. He would be your 7th or 8th guy off. He'd certainly be your first 3-4 off your bench. No doubt about that. I mean,
the conversation is Grayson Allen versus Royce O'Neal. That's the conversation. I mean, you're talking about
Royce's
two guys.
Royce's defense is good. I think Grayson Allen's 3-point shooting
is better than
Royce.
On
this team. His tenacity, and this is the thing that bothers me about Royce O'Neal. And I know we've talked about this a lot as well, and we're an hour and 6 minutes into this already, but there is seemingly a lack of intensity at times from Royce O'Neal, and it drives me crazy. Like it drives. No, they don't. Mulvaney, stop it. Mulvaney says Miss Jay Crowder more than Ted Cruz. No. Mulvaney says Jazz miss Neto too. No, they don't.
Dante Exum?
No, they don't. No. James Knight says Grayson Allen would be sitting on the end of the Jazz bench. Yeah, dude. Right next to the coach getting ready to go in the game.
Yeah, come on.
I mean, Grayson Allen his skill set would absolutely be valuable. There's no way I've ever said and would never say that Grayson Allen's more valuable than Mike Conley.
Yeah.
That is just
That's the classic. That's the classic, hey, I'm commenting on YouTube and going to turn it into something.
Jeremy Bolton says slurp alert on Grayson Allen. I got to tell you, I'd hit that. Trevor Aki says, the hell we miss Neto. Raul Neto. No, you don't miss Neto. You don't. You really don't. Anyway, all right.